Hello, bonjour, buenas tardes. Welcome. My name is Roberto Vicio. I am coordinator of Social Watch. I am here in Doha participating in the Second World Summit on Social Development that has just approved a formal declaration reiterating the commitment to eradicate poverty that was made 30 years ago. I will be your moderator for today's webinar that is called Beyond Symbolism and Rhetoric, ensuring meaningful and deliberate participation and partnerships with the people farthest behind, that is presented by the international movement ATD Fourth World in partnership with UNRWA. Now, before we start, let me do some housekeeping. There is a chat box where you can ask questions all through the webinar, and we will be monitoring them, and they will be asked to our panelists at the end of their contribution. One of our panelists speaks Swahili. Translation will be provided, as well as translation from English into French. To access translation, click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Pour écouter en français, il y a un bouton dans votre écran avec un globe et ça vous remettra à la traduction en française. We are recording this webinar, and after the end, it will be posted in the ATD Fourth World website. So you can share the link and share with your colleagues. Now, I was just saying that a formal declaration has been approved by all governments of the world to renewing the commitment to eradicate poverty, which was made 30 years ago. As we know, in the last 30 years, this has not happened. And there are many reasons about why it hasn't happened, but one of the reasons was explained 700 years ago by the Arab philosopher and actually the founder of modern sociology, that in the year 1377 wrote about what are the requirements of good policy. And he said, and I quote, that among these requirements are submitting to the truth, seeking justice for the oppressed, humbling oneself to the poor, listening to the complaints of those in need. So what he was saying was there has to be consultation with the people that we want to help in their efforts to get lifted out of poverty. Now, consultation has been mandatory for World Bank projects, for example, since 1993, more than 30 years ago. And yet, what we hear from our partners, colleagues, and organizations in the network is that most often than not, this is rubber stamping a project by saying we have consulted with this or that other people, and here it project goes on, but there was no real consultation or participation, and that is why many of those policies fail. And that is one of the reasons why we still have massive poverty all around the world. Now, how can we know if consultation has been real, proper, inclusive, participatory consultation or not? Well, this is precisely the effort, as you will hear from the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, that in partnership with the international movement ATD Fourth World, developed a tool called Inclusive and Deliberate Elaboration and Evaluation of Policies. And that is the result of many, many years of working with people living in poverty or having experienced poverty in their life. It is rooted in the merging of knowledge approach as an instrument to make the meaningful involvement of persons experiencing poverty in the policy design, in the implementation, and the evaluation. Their knowledge, they are the real experts of what is the situation that they are facing. And this is going to be discussed during the seminar, and we will start by having a view, an anticipation of who is going to be with us in the seminar. We will be starting with Asha Atumani Mohammed, who is a person that can bring her personal experiences. We will have Olivier de Schutter, the United Nations Rapporteur to the Human Rights Council on Extreme Poverty, that he will be addressing us through a video. We will have Beatriz Monge Barón and Javier Godinot, who will introduce this tool that they developed. And finally, Gabriel Köhler, who will, from UNRIST, a researcher at UNRIST, who will comment on that tool. So we are honored to start the seminar by listening to Asha. Asha, as a child, participated in ATD's street library activities in her community. And as an adult, she has a knowledge of poverty that she herself experienced and a knowledge of her community, where she served as co-researcher in the hidden dimensions of poverty participatory research projects that were the empirical basis for the development of the tool that we are today presenting. Asha is a respected advocate in her community who informs people of their rights, and she's also a mother of 3 beautiful children. Asha, can you please share your findings? The floor is yours. Asha, I think you are muted. You have to unmute your microphone.
Asante. Ninaitwa Asha Athumani Mohamed. Ni mwanaharakati wa ATD dunia ya 4 na ni mama wa watoto 3. Pia ni mshiriki katika utafiti wa kubaini vipimo vya umaskini ambao ulifanyika kwa kipindi cha miaka 3, 2016 mpaka 2019. Utafiti huu ulifanyika kwa njia ya kuunganisha maarifa ambayo ilibuniwa na ATD pamoja na chuo kikuu cha Oxford kilichopo nchini Uingereza. Ni muhimu kushirikishwa katika tafiti za umaskini kwa sababu watu tunaoishi kwenye umaskini ndio tunaojua sababu, na sisi ndio tunaojua athari za umaskini. Sisi ndio tunakutana na changamoto na madhara ya kuishi katika umaskini uliokithiri. Tuna maarifa sahihi yanayoweza kusaidia kutokomeza umaskini uliokithiri. Umaskini hauwezi kutokomezwa kwa kutumia mitazamo ya watu wengine kwa jinsi wanavyofikiria kuhusu watu wanaoishi katika umaskini. Mfano, mimi binafsi, wakati timu ya uratibu wa ATD uliponibainisha ili kuwa mtafiti mwenza, nilikataa kwa sababu nilikuwa na hofu, kwa kuwa sikuwa na elimu ya mimi kuwa mtafiti na wala sikuwa na elimu ya kujieleza mbele za watu wengine. Timu ya utafiti iliponibainisha na kuniambia kuwa nisikate tamaa, hatimaye nilikubali. Baada ya hapo, timu ya uratibu wa ATD iliunda timu ya utafiti ambayo iligawanyika katika vikundilika 3, ikiwemo sisi watu tunaoishi katika umaskini, wataalamu na wanataaluma. Baada ya hapo, timu ya uratibu wa ATD ilitupatia mafunzo mafunzo ya jinsi gani kufanya kazi, pamoja na mafunzo ya kuweza kukutana na watu wengine kwa kutumia njia ya kuunganisha maarifa. Tulifanya kazi kwa pamoja bila kujali elimu yetu wala hali tulizokuwa nazo, hasa sisi watu tunaoishi katika umaskini. Kwa mfano, mimi nisingeweza kushirikishwa katika utafiti huu, nisingeweza kuzungumza leo hapa. Sasa hivi nimekuwa na uwezo na ujasiri wa kuzungumzia umaskini kwenye mikutano na hata mbele za watu wenye nyadhifa tofauti, bila ya hofu wala bila ya wasiwasi wowote. Pia ninaweza kufahamu haki zangu zinazonihusu. Ninaweza kubadilishana mitazamo na jamii inayonizunguka kuhusiana na umaskini. Halikadhalika, ninaweza kuwa kiongozi katika makundi ya jamii yangu. Ninaonekana kuwa tofauti sasa, tofauti na hapo awali, na kuaminika katika jamii yangu. Hivyo napendekeza kuwa watu wenye uzoefu wa umaskini washirikishwe katika kuunda sera na mipango ya kutokomeza umaskini na utekelezaji wake kwa maendeleo ya jamii. Napendekeza pia watu wanaoishi katika umaskini wahusishwe kikamilifu katika mipango ya maendeleo na kutoa maarifa yao ya uzoefu ili kuchagiza mapambano dhidi ya umaskini uliokithiri na sio tu kuwa vyanzo vya taarifa katika tafiti mbalimbali. Asanteni sana.
Right.
Thank you so much, Asha, for sharing your
Asante.
experience, and your example clearly shows that participation of people living in poverty in the design and implementation of all kinds of projects affecting them is not just a matter of justice, but it will also make these initiatives more effective. So this is what brings change, personal change, as you were saying, changes in the community and in society as a whole. We will now turn to Beatriz and Javier to introduce us to the tool that they have been designing. Beatriz Monge Barón has worked with underprivileged communities in Spain, the United Kingdom, and several Latin American countries, focusing on ensuring access to education and culture for all, promoting meaningful participation and collective thinking with people living in poverty, and she is currently the IDEP coordinator at ATD Fourth World. She is leading the efforts to strengthen dialogue and participatory practice across global projects. My good old friend Javier Godinot is research director of the Joseph Resinski Research and Memory Center. He's a graduate of the Institut d'études politiques de Paris and has been a doctorate in economic science. Javier, in the last years, between 2021 and 2024, has worked with the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Olivier de Schutter, and his assistant, Agathe Osinski, in an expert group and in case studies to design the inclusive, deliberative policy design and evaluation tool with the poorest population, which was made public in February 2024. And now the two of you will explain us how this wonderful tool works. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you all for being here. We will see how we manage to unveil the hidden dimensions of poverty through the research on which Asha gave a very beautiful insight. So when thinking about effective ways to combat poverty, there are three key shifts to consider. Firstly, to recognize that policies or evaluations made for but not with people in poverty often prove ineffective or even harmful, as Robert already said. Secondly, the need to move beyond recognizing the multidimensional nature of poverty to unveiling its hidden dimensions, those that only people who experience poverty can completely reveal. Finally, the urgency of ending superficial or tokenistic participatory initiatives and moving towards genuine deliberation among stakeholders, including, first of all, people living in poverty, as was already said, especially by Asha. So, how did we do to unveil the hidden dimensions of poverty? As Asha said, we organized a 3-year participatory research project that was led by HED Fourth World in collaboration with researchers from Oxford University, and it was conducted in 6 countries, 3 from the Global North and 3 from the Global South: Bangladesh, Bolivia, France, Tanzania, the UK, and the USA. We use the merging of knowledge methodology developed by HED Fourth World, and as you could understand, the specificity of this methodology is to combine the life experience of people living in poverty, the experience of practitioners, their knowledge gained from action, and academic research. Each of these kind of people first build their knowledge in peer groups of people in poverty, peer groups of practitioners, peer group of academics, and then through different meetings, they merge their knowledge to build a single knowledge that is enriched by their specific contributions. So what did we learn through this knowledge, through this research? You can find here the graph of the findings of the hidden dimensions of poverty research. You will see on this graph, on the right-hand side, in green, a first set of dimensions of poverty, which are the most well-known privations. The most well-known is, of course, insufficient and insecure income, but also lack of decent work and material and social deprivation. This is the first set of 3 dimensions. A second set is comprising relational dynamics, and with 3 different dimensions: social maltreatment, institutional maltreatment, and unrecognized contributions. These are relational dynamics. And at the heart of the graph, you have the core experience of poverty with suffering in body, mind, and heart that goes hand in hand with struggle and resistance, because people, of course, resist daily to their suffering, and the dimensions of disempowerment that I said we translate into French as dépossession du pouvoir d'agir. And there are 5 modifying factors which varies in form and degree. Location, first modifying factor is the location, urban, peri-urban, or rural. Second modifying factor, timing and duration, short spells differing from long spells, poverty experienced in childhood or in old age varying from that experience in working age, cultural beliefs concerning, for example, whether poverty is generally thought to be caused by structural factors or by personal failings, identity, with discrimination on grounds such as ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation, adding to that associated with poverty, and environment and environmental policy, from climate change, soil degradation, pollution, and associated policies, to urban deprivation and inadequate public infrastructures. So these are the main findings of the hidden dimensions of poverty research that we have tried after the research was finished to translate into action. And I will now give the floor to my colleague Béatrice Montré-Baron, who will explain how we try to translate this into action. Béatrice, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavier. So the big question after when this research project concluded was how to turn the results of the hidden dimensions of poverty research into action, how to move as experienced through the research from superficial participation to genuine deliberation. And that's exactly what we want to talk about today. Very often, as we all know, participation is completely non-existent. Too often, it is only superficial or cosmetic. People maybe ask about their life experiences or opinions, but real decisions are still made elsewhere. So, what does meaningful participation truly mean? Participation goes beyond providing information or consulting. It is not about extracting experiences or knowledge from people or communities, but about sharing power and co-deciding solutions. Participation is both a means and an end in itself. Not only something we do to make anti-poverty programs more effective, which is, of course, very important, but also an end in itself. When people truly participate, they experience empowerment, transforming the core experience of poverty, as explained by Xavier. At its deepest level, participation leads to deliberation, a process of collaborative reasoning among equals where participants share different knowledge, arguments, listen to one another, and work together to solve complex problems that need cooperation. So the shift we are talking about is from being heard to co-deciding, from consultation to deliberation, and from cosmetic participation to participation as transformation. To make this shift possible in practice, our challenge was to develop a tool to guide decision makers in ensuring deliberation with people in poverty when designing anti-poverty policies and programs. To address this challenge, the IDEEP was developed between 2021 and 23. It was created in partnership with the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Olivier de Schutter. We'll listen to him later on, and ATD Fourth Wall. It was led by a steering committee and advised by a group of experts from international institutions. The development of the IDEEP followed a case study approach that examined 3 anti-poverty programs, one on minimum income, one on integrated housing, and one on campaigns for children living on the streets. The work combined desk research and local partners analysis with deliberative workshops to compare policy objectives with the perspectives of people in poverty and professionals. So, what's the tool we are introducing to you today? The IDEEP is a structured framework for improving the design and assessment of policies and anti-poverty programs, which offers stakeholders. First, a set of questions informed by the hidden dimensions of poverty to guide reflective processes. Then, a detailed, inclusive, and deliberative methodology to involve people in poverty together with others in the policy process. Finally, a series of conditions identified as key to improving the outcomes of deliberation involving people in poverty. Here's how the inclusive and deliberative methodology unfolds step by step. Phase 1, preparation. Different bodies are set up to manage logistics and ensure inclusivity. A core team, including people with lived experience of poverty, and this is very important, a core team with people who experience poverty themselves, designs the deliberative process. Phase 2, data collection. The core team reviews existing data and identifies gaps in knowledge or evaluation. Phase 3, that's the very core of the whole process, deliberative workshops where people in poverty, practitioners, policymakers, and researchers share experiential, professional, and scientific knowledge to co-construct understanding and solutions. Then phase 4, the core team, remember, with people in poverty among them, organizes finding and drafts preliminary conclusions and recommendations. Then draft conclusions are submitted to deliberative triangulation. So again, a process of deliberation among stakeholders. And then the final phase, feedback is integrated into the final report. A 6-phase participative and deliberative process that can only be truly effective if certain conditions are in place. Effective participation of people in poverty throughout the whole process, from defining the problems to co-developing solutions. So not only at one of the phases, but throughout the whole process. Institutional support to ensure recognition and policy impact. Sufficient time and resources for meaningful, unhurried participation. A safe, respectful space for open and judgment-free dialogue. Participant independence from institutional or external pressures. Empowering facilitation to balance voices and build trust. An active, very active attention to power imbalances, ensuring lived experiences shape outcomes. What we've learned, and that's the end of my presentation, is that the lack of long-term direct participation of people in poverty make policies less effective and counterproductive, especially when it comes to hidden dimensions like disempowerment, stigma, or institutional maltreatment. That's why we developed the IDEEP, a deliberative framework designed to foster empowerment and promote justice around policy processes, achieve interventions that truly respond to lived realities, and generate sustainable and rights-based outcomes. Our hope is that today's discussion encourages policymakers and stakeholders to put the IDEEP into practice. Thank you very much for your attention. We look forward to your questions and reflections following the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Beatriz. I am sure that your presentation will raise a lot of questions, and I am looking forward to a very good debate in the next minutes. We will now hear an intervention by Olivier de Schutter, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. He is also co-chair of IPES Food and a member of the Council of Europe's European Committee of Social Rights. Yes, are we ready to see and listen to Olivier? Yep, there it starts.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for allowing me to attend this discussion without being able to be present live on the very important question of the participation of people in poverty. I'd like to thank ATD Fourth World and its partners today, the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, for allowing this important discussion to take place. Now, very often when we speak about the participation of people in poverty, we have in view certain objectives that such participation should be able to fulfill in the interests of the policymaker designing or implementing a particular scheme. We see, for example, participation as important to ensure that the decisions are better informed, to ensure therefore that the decisions will be more effective in reaching the targets set, the objectives set. And we see these policy designs based on the participation of people in poverty as allowing them to be more legitimate because based on a consultation of people in poverty. All this is important, but all this remains insufficient. It is important to build on the knowledge of people in poverty. They are the real experts of the obstacles they face and of the solutions that they can put forward. But the real participation should be much more empowering. It should result in co-constructing solutions. It should place people in poverty not only as owning certain forms of knowledge that are context-based, situated, but also as empowered to make their own choices through a democratic deliberation in which they are actors of the system, in which they co-design the solutions that suit them best, in which they count not only because of their expertise, but also because of the principle according to which there is a right to participation in shaping solutions. Now, the IDEEP tool that Beatrice Monge described and that we co-developed with ATD Fourth World is based on this idea. The idea behind the IDEEP tool is that we need to move beyond a form of participation that is purely instrumental, that is purely extractive, and that participation should develop into a democratic tool for empowerment. We based the work we did on 3 case studies related to a model housing estate in Mauritius. In the discussion around the reform of the Revenu de Solidarité Active, which is the minimum income scheme in France, that was discussed in a merging of knowledge process with actors on the French territory. And finally, the third example is the question of street children in a West African country. Now, in these examples, in these settings, we could understand much better the benefits of ensuring effective participation of people in poverty, the benefits of having a much more democratic and less technocratic approach to addressing poverty and giving people not only a voice at the end of the process to avoid making mistakes or to buy their consent, but a voice at the very start of the process so that they can become co-authors of the solutions that matter to them. And I think that is the spirit in which the IDEEP tool should be used, and it should be seen therefore as a way of democratizing decision making. Thank you very much again for organizing this event. I'm absolutely convinced that in this discussion the interests of policymakers are not opposed to the real experts, people in poverty at the front line of the fight against poverty, and that instead the two can mutually support each other with different perspectives, with different tools at their disposals, with different types of knowledge that could be merged and made fruitful by being connected to one another. Thank you very much indeed, and I look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you so much, Professor De Schutter, for your intervention that really points to the benefits of such an approach, which can be a real improvement in the quality of the outcomes when proper consultation has taken place. It's very often that technocrats or government authorities see participation as a waste of time, but at the end, it is, if the consultation has been well conducted, it is time saved from trying to repair the many mistakes that are made when people's voices have not been heard. We will now hear from my very good friend Gabriel Köhler, who is a development economist affiliated with UNRIST as Senior Research Associate. She worked for many years in the UN, and she is an advisor and an active participant in many NGOs and coalitions. Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Roberto, and thank you so much for the wonderful presentation you made this morning. We're speaking to Roberto, and I happen to be in Doha and at this World Summit for Social Development. And this morning there was a civil society forum at which Roberto spoke about the whole trajectory from the Copenhagen conference 30 years ago to today, and why it didn't really work, all the promises that were made in 1995, and why we now have to have a second summit to remind governments in particular of the need for social justice and equality. Huge thanks to Asha for sharing your experience. That I really appreciate hearing from you and learning from you how this participatory principle is working in practice. A quick point on Doha. Something that strikes me, I've been here now for 3 days listening to different sessions, and what strikes me, one term that keeps reappearing, keeps being mentioned, is the notion, I mean, there's lots of things that ought to be said that aren't, but one term that keeps recurring is that of accountability, and how to actually make governments accountable to the promises that they make at these kinds of conferences. And a bit of an observation, when we sit in these different seminars, in these rooms in the conference center, government after government self-praises what they've accomplished, what kinds of policies they've adopted to eradicate poverty, to further the concept of decent work, living wage, social inclusion. And anyone who knows any of the countries that are being presented there knows of the disconnect between what a government presents on these stages, if we so will, to the reality on the ground, to Asha's reality, for instance. And this disconnect is something that we need to overcome. And I think, therefore, that it's extremely important to have this tool. I send you greetings from Magdalena Sepulveda, who is the director of the UN Research Institute for Social Development, who is simultaneously in a different function or a different seminar, and that is why she's not here. So accountability as a demand from civil society to governments to actually deliver on what they keep promising, what they've been promising for the past 30 years, if we will, and this necessity to monitor how policies are developed and then how they are actually implemented. So I think the IDEEP is an excellent tool, and I really like that graphic presentation of all the many dimensions of hidden poverty. And here in Doha, it's all about eradicating, you know, the how do you say, the conceptual idea is eradicating poverty in all its dimensions. I don't think the hidden dimensions of poverty are very much discussed. And so this is a very important additional layer, an additional factor to bring into this conversation. In UNRIS, the UN Research Institute for Social Development, one of the key sort of signature approaches of UNRIS is that they do research. They are a research institute. That's what's in their DNA. But the research is not done top down. It's always done by researchers based in countries, in the country that is being written about, that's being researched. And those researchers then do focus group discussions and other kind of interactions with the people, the communities, the issues that they then ultimately write about. So I think this participation of affected, well, subjects, but people affected by poverty, living in situations without decent work, without recognition, without sharing and decision making, that's very much in the DNA of how UNRIS proceeds. I'd like to add a few other processes that I think the IDEEP tool might want to feed into. One of them is, I suppose some of you are involved also in the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals, which in a way are an outcome of the Copenhagen Summit on Social Development. So in the monitoring of the SDGs, it's very similar to what I'm experiencing here in Doha, that countries sit on panels, government representatives sit on panels and represent and present a particular image of their country, which is often very polished and makes the country look excellent, or trying very hard to be excellent on the different policy areas that the high-level panel on the SDGs is looking at. And the question is, do they actually, how would one actually feed into that process the role, the participation, the perceptions, and the actual lived experiences of the people that are meant to be helped, supported by the Sustainable Development Goals? And as I'm sure everyone knows, we don't need to repeat this, but there are, I think, 212 indicators to measure the SDGs, but to what extent do actually affected communities and individuals contribute to the discussion of these indicators and to filling the data? So one process where I think this IDEEP tool could be very helpful is to link it up with the reporting to the high-level political forum on the SDGs on those voluntary national reviews. Another element, and I suppose this relates very much to the work of Olivier de Schutter, is in the Human Rights Council, where of course we have all these different conventions where countries periodically report on their performance on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Rights of Women, Indigenous Community Convention, different torture, etc. And to what extent those official reports by governments, those official reports by governments, are actually complemented in most cases by so-called shadow reports. But the IDEEP would be a good way of complementing and deepening those shadow reports, so the civil society reports, the reports from the actual communities on those particular conventions. Is the Convention on the Rights of the Child really working with street children to hear, like your example, to hear what street children actually experience and what kinds of policy recommendations they would like to have written down to the government concerned. And the third area that I think is very interesting, and I'm not quite sure whether you're linked up already. If not, I hope we can do that subsequently. Is citizens data, which is a movement I think started in India, where, as you know, the caste system is very, very systemic social exclusion, and the hidden dimensions of poverty are extremely strongly felt and expressed and experienced there. And that these the IDEEP could link up with citizens data, which is a process whereby socially disadvantaged, economically and politically disadvantaged and excluded communities actually interview themselves, so to speak, and collect data and feed that into surveys that then actually, and I'll say a bit about that one step further, but that's a a movement coming out of India, fed into this citizens data movement globally, and is now actually being also used to complement the national statistical reporting that governments do. I have one example that I would like to add, and then I want to give a question to all of you experts as my closing point. So the example I'd like to add, because I think it is important, it's important to register and record and how do you say, sort of make thematic and visible the hidden dimensions and the expression of the hidden dimensions of extreme poverty. But when we've done that, to the degree that we've done that, how do we then actually jump the gap to make that really work, translate into policy decisions? And so one example that I find quite interesting, because I work there myself, is the negotiation, is the process on negotiating a treaty on business and human rights. And this is basically looking at how transnational corporations are exploiting people and the planet, to put it into one sentence. This is a process that's been taking place in Geneva for many years. But what is really, really relevant about it is that the hidden dimensions of poverty and expropriation of resources, a lot of civil society organizations are able to bring actual affected communities into the meeting room in Geneva to talk with the policymakers who are drafting the text of an actual treaty, and to face their respective governments, face down their respective governments in Ghana or in Guatemala or in other places that are actually helping transnational corporations to exploit the people, the community, and the resources of that particular geographical area. And it's a struggle, and it's been going on for a decade, but it is one example where collected experiences and sort of, made tangible experiences of the affected communities are actually speaking in the room to the people who are, or the institutions rather, that need to change their behavior, to put it politely. So that's one example of where I think this IDEEP and similar tools, focus group discussions, multidimensional poverty surveys, et cetera, can feed into, making the unveiling the hidden dimensions of extreme poverty. And I'd like to close with a question. You all very frequently in your presentations, Beatrice and Xavier, and also Olivier, and of course Roberto always does it, the issue of power hierarchies. And that's one question that I would have specifically to Asha, because I don't know your particular lived experience, but I know in my own setting, in my own family, in my own community, in my own NGO where I work, not my own, I mean the NGO where I work, we have power hierarchies. Who gets to talk more? Who gets to decide? And it's based on very many of the factors that you have in that graph. How does one, with such a even with the best intentioned tool, how do we actually tackle that particular predicament? Let me finish there, and I'm very happy that we can have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Thank you for highlighting the dimensions of power asymmetries and how they affect participation, and also signaling that it's not just the governments, which of course authorities at different levels from the local to the global have a responsibility in ensuring participation, but at the same time there are vested interest, corporations, exploitation of the communities where people live that quite clearly oppose or create obstacles to that to effectively happen. With that, I think we finished the first part of this conversation. I want to thank all the panelists for their very rich, thoughtful contributions. We already have several questions that were formulated in the Q&A, and I am going to start with them. You can still add more questions. But let me start with a question by A.A. Wynn. She says, thanks for the presentation of the IDEEP tool. You said you have 3 pilot projects now. From the perspective of your team, of your organization, what would be the main constraints to the implementation of the IDEEP tool on a larger scale? Who takes that challenge?
I can start if you agree. I think one of the main obstacles we face in implementing the IDEEP is to have the contribution of policymakers. As you may have understood, in the hidden dimensions of poverty research, we implemented a merging of the methodology with practitioners, people in poverty, and researchers. But policymakers were not really part of this research. And the objective of the IDEEP tool is to engage policymakers into participatory processes. And this is, as you know, very difficult because they are very busy. They don't want to put themselves in risky positions, in positions where they will be challenged. And so I think this is the main obstacle, the main constraint is to manage to implement policymakers in the process. We are trying to do it, and we are, in fact, beginning to do it in Canada. But this is a first step, and we are also trying to do it in other countries. But we are at the very beginning, trying to get the agreement of big policymakers to engage into process.
Thank you so much, Javier. Gabrielle, in her presentation, made a question directly to Asha. So I would like to hear, Asha, if you can tell us about how this dynamic of power and people having different degrees of power affects or interferes in the participation process. Yes, Asha, floor is yours. Your microphone is muted.
Ni sawa. Naomba urudie swali, sijaelewa.
Yes,
Sijaelewa sana.
the question was, when you have this consultation and people participate in taking decisions about the project or what is going to happen in the communities, people have different degrees of power. Some have authority, maybe they are rich, maybe they are working for a corporation. There are different levels involved. What is your experience about that?
Roberto, if I may add, I mean, in actually seemingly flat hierarchy where everyone is the same, but there are always hidden dimensions of poverty, either between women and men, or between older people like myself and younger people, or hidden dimensions that might play out like caste or indigeneity. And so even in a non-hierarchical setting, seemingly non-hierarchical setting, there might be people, there might also just be extroverts versus introverts who are less shy to speak. I think Asha was mentioning that in the beginning you didn't really want to participate because you felt you didn't feel like speaking in front of other people. So even that, how do we have a perfect participation where everyone says what they perceive, what they experience, and what they would like to share. Thank you.
Ni sawa, nimeelewa. Katika utafiti ambao tulikuwa tukiufanya, tulikuwa tukitofautisha makundilika. Tulikuwa tukifanya kwa wanawake ambao wanaishi na uzoefu wa umaskini, tukiweka katika kundilika lao peke yao na kutuambia yale maarifa yao wanayoyafahamu yanayohusiana na umaskini uliokithiri. Na hapo walikuwa wanafunguka na kutueleza, kwa sababu walikuwa hawana hofu ya kuchanganyika na makundi mengine, walikuwa ni wao peke yao. Lakini hata wanaume walikuwa na makundilika yao ambayo pia walikuwa wanawezeshwa ili kutoa yale maarifa yao yanayohusiana na umaskini. Na hapo walielezea bila hofu pia, kwa sababu walikuwa peke yao, wakawa wanatoa yale maarifa yao yanayohusiana na umaskini. Na baadaye tulienda kuunganisha yale maarifa ya wanawake na wanaume ambayo yanafanana na kuyaweka katika kundi moja na kisha kuyapatia jina la kipimo.
Thank you so much, Asha. And I think our own experience here in this conversation proves how important translation is, so that we can understood. My experience is that very often, there is no provisions for translation to local languages when participation is conducted. Beatriz, you wanted to comment on this.
Yes, thank you, Roberto. Thanks for the question, Gabrielle. I think, well, Asha already spoke about methodology, about the peer groups. I'm going to come back to that. I think there is one very first point that is very important, that all participants accept that there is power imbalances. And very often, this is not is not easy. So what seems obvious to us, as you describe it, that there is many different kinds of power imbalances. Sometimes for participants, it's difficult to accept that, to admit that, and to accept that we need to work on that. So there is a very important preparation process for participants, all participants, in a process where everyone can accept that and somehow accept to do the personal process that takes to share power and give power away. And so that's one very important point. And then the second point is to accept that those who usually has less power or no power at all are going to be on the lead of this thinking process. And this is difficult as well sometimes, because for those who are used to speak first, to be the ones leading the process, leading the question, leading the thinking process, is difficult to accept, okay, I'm going to go after those who usually they don't have power at all. And then there is methodology, as Asha has explained. So it's not only goodwill. So we need to start by accepting the reality, having the will to do the personal process and the collective process that take us elsewhere, and then using a very precise methodology. And then merging of knowledge, as Asha explained, has developed this methodology based on peer group work. So before any kind of deliberation, before any kind of speaking together, we ensure that everyone has the space with their peers to develop their own thinking really far. Because some people, like researchers or even policymakers or professionals, had before the opportunity to think with others, to develop their questions, to develop their thinking. But those who never had the opportunity to participate in in thinking, collective thinking processes, they often had no opportunities. They had opportunities to think by themselves, of course, in their own minds, because we all human beings, we are thinkers and we reflect on the reality we experience, but they had very little or few or none opportunities to think with their peers. So to have this space with peers to develop your own questions, to share your experiences and make of this experience collective knowledge is part of the methodology. And then after that, deliberation comes, but not before that. And very often participatory initiatives put all people around the same table to speak at the same time. So some people are able to talk, to speak, and others not at all. So this question of methodology is very important. So the peer groups, and then of course there are other aspects of the methodology that are very precise and that are related to facilitation, to tools, very concrete tools, how we do it. So the IDEEP tool, this tool we are presented today, incorporates all the experience of this merging of knowledge methodology. So there is a very precise way to do that. And I think you're very right to ask this question, because it's the real question. It's not only goodwill, but it's about methodology. And that's what we have tried to develop through this tool.
Yeah, please, Javier, related to what you just said, I have a question by Wouter van Ginneken, who says that he understands that the IDEEP tool is going to be or is already implemented in countries such as Tanzania, Haiti, and possibly Canada. Would it be possible to say a bit more on those plans and maybe if you have any preliminary results?
No, it's a bit too soon. In fact, we have been trying to implement the IDEEP tool in several countries. It started in Canada. It's being implemented now, but we don't know yet the results. We would like to implement it in Tanzania, and we are in discussion, in negotiation with the World Bank to see if the World Bank and other partners would agree to take part in this process. And we would like to implement it in Haiti as well. Because our team in Haiti is very much willing to do it, as you know, as an hope for the families who are in a very difficult situation, and would like to make something positive and to demonstrate that not only people will success with violence, but it's possible also to success with such a tool and to have a participation of people living in poverty to the building of the policies in the country. But it's still a wish. It's not yet implemented. We are doing every effort to implement it, and we hope we will manage, but it's not sure yet.
Maybe
No,
we can.
Yes,
Maybe
go
we
on.
can just. Sorry.
Yes, Beatriz.
May I add one specific point coming from Tanzania, because I had the opportunity to see how the hidden dimensions of poverty research develop in Tanzania, and I could see what Asha explained well, that at the beginning, women were not listened to by men, but little by little, it became different. We constructed peer group of women who were very vocal, and at the end of the process, you could clearly see the contribution of women in the whole process, and that was very interesting. And on the other side, on the side of academics, one of the academics noticed that at the beginning, when he spoke, people dare not speak after him. They said, yes, you're the professor, and when you say something, we will say yes. And he discovered that when he spoke after people living in poverty, it was completely different. So he decided not to speak first, but to speak last, and to question people living in poverty, to challenge their reflection and know if it was solid. And he discovered that it was a powerful process to, push people in poverty to give the best of their knowledge, of their experience, of their thinking. So instead of speaking first, speaking last, for an academic, which is a revolution.
Yes. Beatriz, you wanted to add something.
Yes, just coming back to the question about implementation. So it's true that it's very soon to speak about results or the outcomes of the process, but maybe it's interesting to know that this the implementation in Montreal, Canada, to say a little bit about that, is a department from health ministry in Montreal, who wanted to know more about prevention of homelessness. So they are using the IDEEP with a small group of people, but including policymakers, researchers, professionals, and people that both experience homelessness, but as well that are on the border of experiencing homelessness, to think together using the IDEEP about what are the key initiatives that must be implemented to prevent homelessness. So this is a very interesting implementation of the IDEEP, and we hope that this can encourage others to do so, because what we hope is that, of course, the IDEEP can be implemented to think about big national policies, but as well about smaller projects, to look at things in a very precise way with a small group of people. So this is well, an interesting example, and we hope other examples will come. The same for the IDEEP give us the opportunity to evaluate policies. So things that are already in place, and we can evaluate them through this deliberative process. So, well, just to give this one example that is already happening.
Thank you. I have a question to Gabrielle from AA Win. She's asking, she's thanking Gabrielle for the intervention, for the excellent work on UNRISH, and asks what scope is there for UNRISH to fully embrace the IDEEP tool in its research work, going beyond civil society participation and country-based researchers to actually engaging fully in IDEEP methodology, going through the different phases outlined by Beatriz earlier.
That's a loaded question. I don't know. I think it's an interesting tool. I think there are several interesting tools, and I think for me as a pluralist, it's more about getting the different efforts and initiatives that all want the same thing, to uncover hidden exclusions, hidden economic poverty, but also political exclusion, social exclusion, that we need to sort of talk to each other much more to say, okay, what are your experiences? What's your tool? What are your steps? What's your methodology? What are other people doing? Whether one would exclusively adopt one particular tool, frankly, I doubt it. But it's a nicely loaded question.
Yes. I do not have any more questions here, but I think can ask our panelists if they want to add something.
Well, maybe I can add, following Gabrielle, about how to integrate and how to use different tools. And we think, of course, this is always a challenge, and every tool brings something to be used that can be useful. What we think we are I think I can hear the interpretation. Can you as well? That's it now. So what we think we can, this tool brings is two things: is really taking into consideration these hidden dimensions of poverty, but seriously, because very often in the speech, people, of course, may now everybody speaks about the multidimensional nature of poverty, and even they can recognize there are some things that we cannot see if it's not with those who experience that. But at the moment of designing policies, then these hidden dimensions or this core experience of poverty is considered less important. So I think what this tool brings is the conviction that this core experience of poverty is really the core experience of poverty. So it should be the core of our anti-poverty programs or policies. And if we don't take that into account, if we only take it into account as theoretically, then policies, they don't work. So this is one thing that is important. And the other thing is this very precise methodology for participation that really truly makes participation policies. So, and makes outcomes unknown, meaning that when you use a truly participatory methodology, then you don't know the outcomes because it is about participation. So this is something you can measure if it's really participatory. If the outcomes are the same you had in mind at the beginning, then you can doubt it was really participatory. But if the outcomes are different, then maybe you think, okay, we did something different. So these are the two aspects that the ID tool brings and that we can take advantage of. Of course, as you say, Gabrielle, that thinking how we can use it with others that have other experiences as well and have developed other tools as well. And so that's why we wanted so much this dialogue, to be with others, thinking with others, and implementing this IDIP tool, and identifying as well the things that can be improved and can be incorporated from other initiatives or tools. So thanks. That's is very much the way forward and what we need.
I have a question about the reaction from policymakers who are used to hold the reins of power, and how are they reacting to the IDIP tool. But before that, I see that Gabrielle had raised her hand.
Let's go with that question first. I'll say something later. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so Javier, would you like to?
Yes, I would like to insist that the IDIP tool is a tool for freedom and democracy. We are in a context where democracy is undermined in many countries. And the IDIP tool, I want to insist, it is a tool for freedom, the freedom of people in poverty to speak, to be heard, and to contribute. And if you don't take into account the power asymmetries that we have mentioned several times during this discussion, in fact, people in extreme poverty are silenced. So they cannot be heard, they cannot contribute. And we need to have tools to enable them to contribute, to speak, to be heard, and the IDIP tool is made for that. This is why I say it's a tool for freedom, and it's a tool for democracy. And we really need it in this time of when the democracies are undermined in many countries.
Yes, thanks for that. Gabrielle?
Yeah, I think it's about co-creation, right? That we all together, look at different tools that are being created in different parts of the world and see how one can maybe add components from each of them. I'm to bring it to this Doha summit. I'm quite struck that there are many representatives of people discriminated against on the basis of work and descent. What in South Asia is caste, but in other communities has a different classification. But basically, people who have economic poverty, political exclusion, and very many hidden dimensions within that. And I think it would be interesting to run this and similar tools by that particular community who are gaining a lot of visibility. So they're coming out of the hidden dimension into visibility now at this particular summit and in other processes. And what they're actually trying to accomplish is well, I think that the high point would be a convention, but probably they're going for a UN resolution to overcome the caste system, if you know, in shorthand. And so it would be interesting because I suppose that different communities discriminated in the type of work that they do, or because of their descent, because of their appearance, whether they, you know, what they can, you know, how they will find the common denominator of what they would want such a resolution to actually address, because I presume that their hidden exclusions are different in the different locations that they live. So that would be interesting. And the other component, or the other topic that strikes me, is the whole question of indigenous communities and free and prior informed consent, that communities really know when an exploitation of their resources is planned. And often, as we know from the literature or from our own practice, depending on where we work, there are actually different opinions within a community. And some people will actually want the excavator to come into the community, and others are totally against it. How does one, what kind of tools and implements and processes does one have to actually, I don't know if we forge consensus, but, you know, at least exchange the different, you know, make unhidden, reveal the different interest groups, even at the peer level of a given indigenous community, as an example. So I think there's lots of questions and processes to address. And finally, I think this issue of democracy, people are not just silenced. I mean, they're murdered. So many human rights defenders, climate rights defenders, nature defenders are actually killed. So I think we live in very, very difficult times. And so these participatory processes, I think they might also, in many of the dictatorships that are now in the authoritarian countries, actually might also be very threatened if they try to apply this very democratic participatory approach. So I think we also need to bear that in mind. Thank you.
Yes, I think, if I may abuse a bit my role of moderator to insert part of our experience in Latin America, as you mentioned, Gabrielle, is that hundreds of community organizers defending the environment or defending human rights are killed every year. And as a reaction to that, governments of the region have signed a treaty, legally binding treaty, establishing 3 access rights of communities. And this is called the Escazú Treaty. You can find it easily in the internet. Escazú, which is the town in Costa Rica where the treaty was signed. And the Escazú Treaty says that communities have 3 access rights. One is access to information. When something is being planned that will affect a community, the community should be informed. Then the second one is access to consultation. Now, it doesn't define, and that's where the IDIP tool should, you know, because the government can claim that they consulted and they didn't really consult. That's another problem. But in principle, it's a legal right that communities have to be consulted. And the third one is access to justice to seek remedy if there was no information and there was no consultation, and therefore bad things happen in the community, the justice should hear them and provide remedies to solve the situation. Now, this is the law. Then the law needs to be exercised, needs to be practiced. It's my personal feeling that there can be a link there with IDIP. But I have an important question that was formulated. Probably, I think Asha could respond to that, which is about the process of people in poverty, having experienced poverty, how can they be interested in participating in such an exercise, in such a process? I mean, what do we need to do to get them really interested and participating?
Can I just add, and how can we get them to have the time to be able to participate?
Well, yes, that is true, because people are frequently overwhelmed, overworked, and
The time and the means.
the means, definitely. Definitely. Asha, do you want to comment on that?
Watu wanaoishi katika umaskini wanaweza kushiriki ndio katika mijadala na hasa yanayohusiana na hali zao za kimaisha, kwa sababu wao ndio wanauishi ule umaskini na wana maarifa sahihi ambayo yanaweza kuwafanya wao waweze kuondokana na umaskini walionao, kwa sababu watu ambao wana uzoefu wa umaskini ni watu wenye nguvu na uwezo wa kuzungumza pale ambapo wanashirikishwa kiukamilifu, kwa sababu wanapotengwa na jamii huwa wanakosa nguvu ya kuongea na kuzungumza yale yanayowasibu ili kufikia mwafaka wa kutatua changamoto zao. Lakini pale wanaposhirikishwa ni watu wenye nguvu, lakini pia ni watu ambao wanajiamini kile ambacho wanachokiongea ni sahihi kwao na ndicho ambacho kinaweza kuwaletea mwafaka wao kutoka katika umaskini ule uliokithiri. Asanteni. Kuna swali lingine?
Thank you very much, Asha. And I think this is not just the answer to a question, but it is a summary of what we have been saying, and given that it is about the time to finish this encounter, I think this is a perfect summary. So I thank you very, very much, Asha, for your intervention. And I thank, of course, Gabriel, Beatriz, Xavier, and Oliver, the shooter, for their participation, ATD for Fourth World, and UNSWIST for co-sponsoring this panel, and to all of you for having spent this time with us, for formulating the questions, for listening so patiently. If you thought this was interesting, share the news and the video that is going to be posted in the ATD Fourth World website very soon. So we have learned in this process how important that participation is. We have learned to, as the title said, move beyond symbolism and rhetoric to have informed, meaningful participation of the people affected. And that requires time, requires resources, requires planning. And this tool, I think it's a wonderful tool to really be able to assess the quality of the consultation. And because consultation that is pure rhetoric, as was also said, can do more damage than good. So with that, I would like to to motivate people to continue thinking about this, participating about this, and I would say taking the promises that our governments are making here in Doha in these days to actually eradicate poverty, taking them seriously, but knowing that, again, that will be rhetoric if the people are not demanding to put those promises into practice and to actually walk the talk. Thank you all very much. If there is no urgent last minute comment, yes, Javier.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for moderating this panel and doing it very well. Thank you again.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
meet all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Beatriz.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Asha. Good luck with your work.
Asante kwa kunishirikisha.
Ante.
Okay. Asante na mimi pia nimeshiriki, nimefurahi.
Thank you.
Asante kwa kunishirikisha katika mkutano huu. Nimefurahi sana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
We are happy to have you here with us.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Asante.
Exactly.
And I think this is not just the answer to a question, but it is a summary of what we have been saying, and given that it is about the time to finish this encounter, I think this is a perfect summary. So I thank you very, very much, Asha, for your intervention. And I thank, of course, Gabriel, Beatriz, Xavier, and Oliver, the shooter, for their participation, ATD for Fourth World, and UNSWIST for co-sponsoring this panel, and to all of you for having spent this time with us, for formulating the questions, for listening so patiently. If you thought this was interesting, share the news and the video that is going to be posted in the ATD Fourth World website very soon. So we have learned in this process how important that participation is. We have learned to, as the title said, move beyond symbolism and rhetoric to have informed, meaningful participation of the people affected. And that requires time, requires resources, requires planning. And this tool, I think it's a wonderful tool to really be able to assess the quality of the consultation. And because consultation that is pure rhetoric, as was also said, can do more damage than good. So with that, I would like to people to motivate people to continue thinking about this, participating about this, and I would say taking the promises that our governments are making here in Doha in these days to actually eradicate poverty, taking them seriously, but knowing that, again, that will be rhetoric if the people are not demanding to put those promises into practice and to actually walk the talk. Thank you all very much. If there is no urgent last minute comment, yes, Javier.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for moderating this panel and doing it very well. Thank you again.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
meet all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Beatriz.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Asha. Good luck with your work.
Asante kwa kunishirikisha.
Asante.
Okay. Asante na mimi pia nimeshiriki, nimefurahi.
Thank you.
Asanteni kwa kunishirikisha katika mkutano huu. Nimefurahi sana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
We are happy to have you here with us.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Asante.
Exactly.